Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you everyone who have made it to today's session on Zakat. We appreciate you taking the time on a weekday to join us for this important session. Inshallah, we're gonna give it a minute or two, just as I see a lot of people still trickling in. So hopefully, for the benefit of everyone, we can let them all settle in. It's gonna be another exciting program for us. This is something we try to do on an annual basis, so hopefully some of you may have attended a previous one that our team has put out. If you've missed any of the prior ones, the recordings are always available either on the website or on our YouTube channel. And today's session as well will be recorded so that any tips or responses that you need to reference will be available to you after as well. So again, I just want to thank you for those that have made it, and we'll give it another 30 seconds or so before diving right in. And we'll start with the brief introduction and then go into the program. So thank you. Just hang tight. All right, thank you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to today's Zakat webinar. My name is Ali Radawalji. I'm the CEO at Sharia Portfolio. I'm joined today by our esteemed scholar, Sheikh Omer Khan. He's our Sharia advisor. And we will be going into a very important topic. As you all know, Zakat, one of the 5 pillars of Islam, is a powerful topic that helps us fulfill our obligations and is part of worship, at the same time allowing us to participate in our social responsibilities, purifying our wealth, and of course supporting those who are in need. So today's topic will be a little bit different in the sense that we are going to present a little bit, but open it up primarily to the audience to submit any questions that they have. Every year, we tend to get some slightly different questions, but there are some common ones that we do encounter. So, after some brief introductory remarks by Sheikh Omer, we will be using this opportunity to cover some of those common questions so that you have a good, deep foundational, understanding of what the obligations are, the calculations and things of that nature. And then we're here to be able to, inshallah, look at your questions. Some of those we may address right away in the chat, in the Q&A box. Some of those we may end up answering live in today's session. So I'm gonna, inshallah, put this slide up just so that you guys have it for reference. And Sheikh Omer also has his slide deck as well. And this is our general disclaimer slide that we put on all of our webinars. Just any advice should generally be taken by speaking with your advisor about your particular investments and needs. And whatever we're presenting is for educational purposes and is not intended to provide any advice necessarily. So just wanted to throw that out there. But without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Our contact information is here. So if anyone does need to reach out, whoever is new, I see some new names on the list of attendees. If you're trying to get in touch with us to be on our newsletter or send in a request, inquiry, or just send in a comment, whatever you found interesting after today's session, any thoughts, comments, observations, we would be more than happy to hear from you. And the QR code should also get you into one of our newsletters. So feel free to scan that as you progress here. So thank you once again. I will stop my screen sharing and turn it to Sheikh Omer, who will kick us off with some brief remarks. And then for again, as a friendly reminder, if you are just joining in or if you missed what I mentioned earlier, please do use the Q&A box to submit any questions so that we can try and attempt to answer as many as possible in today's session. And look forward to having you all participate and enjoy, hopefully live with some important nuggets after today. So, Jazakallah khair. Thank you once again. And welcome Sheikh Umar to today's session. Thank you.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So usually I have a very comprehensive long set of slides. I still have the set of slides, but the idea is I will go through them relatively quickly just to lay the foundations of zakat. And we want to focus the majority of our time on questions and answers. So I will somewhat, go through maybe the most important topics that we need to cover from a zakat perspective. Okay, so we already went through the disclaimer. I don't have to do that. Just really quickly, the thing I want to point out, everyone knows like Arabic, it means to grow or to purify. But legally speaking, from a Sharia perspective, zakat is something that's different than sadaqah. So I just want to point that out, that sadaqah is voluntary charity. We can choose to give it or not give it. We can choose to give more. We can choose to give less. We can choose who we want to give it to, what cause we want to give it for. All of that is completely up to us. As compared to zakah, which is not voluntary at all. Zakat is something that is mandatory, something that we have to do, and it is a fixed amount on the wealth that we have, and it can only be given to specific causes and specific people. And I'm not going to go into all of that detail, but just a reminder that it's not just, hey, I gave my zakat because I just gave it to some random people. You have to validate that the cause is zakat eligible. Ali Radha already mentioned, why we give zakat. So just to kind of quickly brush through it, obviously it is a command of Allah, and that should be sufficient for us to give zakat. It's a pillar of our deen, it along with prayer and hajj and fasting and doing the shahada. And so very, very important part of our deen. The Quran again and again talks about both prayer as well as giving zakat. It purifies our soul from greed. It as we have to part with our wealth and give it to others, it helps us grow as individuals, helps us understand our relationship with money, helps us realize the money comes from Allah. It also purifies our wealth from any impurities we may have accumulated over time. Sometimes we're not doing the best work, sometimes we're not being the best to our customers, and so it just purifies any of the deficiencies we might have had in our wealth. It also, of course, from an economic perspective, bridges the gap between the rich and the poor, and also builds relationships between the rich and the poor. When the rich give to the poor see that, they connect, and their hearts soften towards the poor, and when the poor towards the rich, and when the rich give, their hearts soften towards the poor because they see how much they need it and say, wow, is zakat only really 2.5% most of the time? You actually might want to give more because when you see what condition they're in. And then, of course, it promotes the circulation of wealth. And this is something fundamental to Islamic principles, that when Allah gives us wealth, Allah's expectation of what we do with that wealth is that either we're spending that wealth, or we are giving that wealth to somebody as gift or as charity or as a zakat, or we are investing that wealth. So yes, it's okay to be carrying on to some cash, some amount of cash that we may need for emergencies and upcoming bills and things like that. Some emergency stash that you might have for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, something like that. But the general idea in Islam is the Islamic principles are that wealth is something that money should be circulating around. And so that's why we should be spending it, or we should be giving it, or we should be investing it. And that's very important because a lot of people don't realize, they just sit on cash. It's from the Islamic principles that we should be doing something with that money. And as that wealth circulates, we learn from micro and macroeconomics that it boosts the economy. It creates value for individuals, for societies, for communities. It creates jobs, it creates beneficial products and services, and it's just healthy for everybody. Okay, so who needs to pay zakat? Again, really quickly, you have to be Muslim. And I'm just going to blast through this, but the idea is that if you have a minimum of nisab, it's called nisab, which is measured in both gold and silver, it's equal to 20 dinars or 200 dirhams. Back at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, those two numbers were the same. 20 dinars equaled 200 dirhams. Over time, the price of gold and silver has separated. Gold grew more in value than silver did over time. And so as a result, scholars have generally preferred that we pay on we make the nisab based on gold as opposed to silver, which is approximately $8,000. So if we have $8,000 of wealth, then we have to pay zakat. Okay, if we have the minimum of that, but not immediately when you get to $8,000, but as soon as you have had that $8,000 and then a lunar year, an Islamic year has passed, 354 days have passed, that would be the first time that you pay zakat. What amount do you pay zakat on? You would look at all of the balances of all of your wealth whenever that year has passed and whatever that total amount is. So I look at my checking account, is this much money? I look at my stock account, is this much money? I look at, my wallet, is this much money? I add all of those up and I will pay zakat on that. Okay. So moving on to calculating zakat, again, I'm going to just cover this at a bare bones foundational level. Calculating zakat. Now, zakat is not something that we pay on income, generally speaking, unless we're dealing with agriculture and harvesting, or we're dealing with hidden treasures and cattle and things like that. There's exceptions, but generally, most of us we have some cash, we have some stocks, we have some maybe real estate, some other investments, things like that. And we do not pay zakat on income. So it doesn't matter if I made $100,000 in a year, I'm not going to pay $2,500 zakat on my income. The income is completely irrelevant to zakat. Zakat is paid on savings. It is paid on savings. It's paid on the balance that we have in our bank account, for example. And we don't care about how much I saved this year. What we care about is what is my accumulated savings. So if I saved $1,000, 10 years ago, and then another 1,000 the year after, and then another 1,000, another 1,000, at this point, if it's become 8,000, okay, I wait a year, and then I will have to pay zakat on that, and maybe becomes 9,000 by next year. I will pay zakat on that $9,000. Okay, so zakat is not on income. Zakat is not on how much I saved this year. Rather, zakat is on total savings that I have. Two other quick concepts I want to talk about. What is not zakatable? There's things that we don't have to pay zakat on. Out of Allah's mercy, there are many things that are in use, basically. So our house, our furniture, our cars, our clothing, jewelry that we are wearing. There's a difference of opinion on gold and how we treat gold. So the Hanafis said that you do pay zakat on gold jewelry, whereas the Malikis and the Shafi'is said you don't pay. The Hanbalis, some of them took one side, some of them took the other side. So there's a difference of opinion on gold and what you do with gold. And personally, I find this difference of opinion after doing extensive research to be that gold at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was a type of currency. It was a unit of measure, it was a medium of exchange, and it was a store of value. If you look at gold in our time, yes, it's still a store of value, but it's not a unit of measure, it's not a medium of exchange, and therefore we look at gold differently than how gold was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is how the scholars kind of evaluated, said, should we pay zakat on gold or not? So if it's part of jewelry that you wear, my opinion would be that you don't have to pay zakat on it. But if you're using gold as a form of store of value, like you are holding on to gold bars, gold bullion, gold coins, or you hold the ETF GLD or something like that, then you would pay zakat on it. So these are the things that you pay zakat on. What you don't pay zakat on, sorry, those are the things you don't pay zakat on. What you do pay zakat on is any extra money that you have. So cash, money in your bank account, gold and silver, like I said, that's not jewelry that you're wearing, cryptocurrency, stocks, retirement accounts, 401k, Roth 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, SEP, simple IRA, all of these different types of retirement accounts, ESAs, HSAs, you will pay zakat on. Assets that you're holding for capital gains. So whether that be an art collection that you have that you're holding on to as an investment, or collectibles, or jewelry that you've purchased as investment, or fancy cars that you might have bought just for investment purposes, any real estate that you're looking to flip. So you bought a house and you're looking to flip that house, you would pay full zakat on that. And then there's zakat on business as well. Business works similar to your personal assets. So if there's things that you're using, like fixed assets. Let's say you have a pizza shop and you have a pizza making machine. You do not pay zakat on that pizza making machine because you're putting it to good use. But the cash in the cash register, you would pay zakat on. So cash, accounts receivable, and inventory are the three aspects of a business that you have to pay zakat on. And we said agriculture works differently. Okay. So those are kind of some of the core concepts of zakat. The final thing that I think I want to talk about, because I think many of the people here might be concerned about, is how do you pay zakat on stocks? Okay. So how do you pay zakat on stocks? Now, the scholars have effectively, essentially defined stocks into two categories. And I'll explain it. I'll explain how they used to do it. I'll explain another proposed mechanism as well. So I'll give a little bit of history, talk about how stocks used to work, and then talk about how stocks work today. Because I know this is going to be the first question. So let's just start with that one, as how does zakat work on stocks? So fundamentally, like I said, there are things that you might be buying for gains. You're looking for their value to appreciate. You treat them like commodities. So if I buy a fancy car, a classical, a classic collectible car that I think I will buy today for, $300,000 and I can sell it for 500,000 in the future, then I will be paying zakat on the full value of that commodity because it is an item of trade. And scholars have universally agreed, there's consensus, that if you have an item that's for trade, something that you buy and sell, then you will pay zakat on the full value. And we mentioned this earlier, but just to repeat, zakat on the full value means if it's $300,000, then we're paying 2.5% of that as zakat. So that's going to be $7,500 that you pay on this classic car that you purchased for $300,000. Okay, so 2.5% of the market value. So that's how you think about commodities, whether it be that car, whether it be inventory. That if I have a retail store that buys and sells smartphones, then any smartphones I have, I would have to pay 2.5% of the market value on those smartphones because my business is buying and selling phones. Like I said, if you're flipping houses, your job is to flip houses. When I buy that house and I sell that house, as long as I'm holding onto the house, I would pay on 2.5% of the market value. So what the scholars have said is that anyone in the 1980s and 90s, they said, if you're buying stocks for gains, for capital gains, you're buying it because you want the value to appreciate. And because that's what you're looking at, we will treat it like a commodity. And therefore, you will pay on 2.5% of the market value of the stock. So if I have $100,000 worth of Tesla shares, I will be paying $2,500 as zakat. Okay, this was the opinion. They also said, if instead of buying the stock for as a commodity and worrying about the capital gains and the appreciation of the stock, what if you purchased the stock because you cared about the dividends? They said, well, dividends, you're not really caring about the stock price anymore. What you're now caring about is the profit that the business makes. So now let's treat the stock as a business. And so going back to what I said earlier, they would say for a business, you would only pay on the cash, the accounts receivable, and the inventory of the business. So you go and you calculate and you say, for Tesla shares, what is the cash? How much cash does Tesla have? How much accounts receivable do they have? How much inventory do they have? And let me calculate the zakat on that. And that actually ends up being much less zakat. It's not 2.5% anymore. It's going to be like less than 1%, maybe even less than 0.5% on many of the companies. Okay, so this was the fatwa. The fatwa was if you're buying shares for appreciation, you pay 2.5% of market value. And if you're buying it for dividends, then you would pay zakat on a business. You have to look at the balance sheet. Okay. Now, myself, Sheikh Joe Bradford, Mufti Faraz Adam, many of the people who are in this field of Islamic finance, halal finance, ethical finance, we've been following this trend and we've realized that over the last many years, how people invest in the stock market has changed and evolved. And so our proposal is a little bit different than the fatwa that used to exist in the 1990s. And this is what many people have now started following, which is that people, when they buy stocks, oftentimes they're no longer thinking about capital gains versus dividends. They're looking at the business as a whole. And by the way, both the capital gains and the dividends are a function of the profitability of the business. So for those of you that are in the field of finance, in the field of accounting, you will know that even the stock value, the valuation of a stock as performed by an analyst is performed using a method. For example, one of the most common methods is called discounted cash flow, DCF. The DCF mechanism to calculate the value of a stock is based on its future profitability discounted back to today's present value. I know that was very technical. You don't need to understand the technical aspects of this, but here's what I want you to understand. What I want you to understand is the dividends and the value of the stock are both a function. Both of them are a result, an output of the anticipated profits of the business. So how the business profits will impact the stock value, okay? And it will also impact the dividends. And what's happened over time is dividends have fallen a little bit out of fashion. Why? Because dividends create an immediate tax event that the shareholders have to respond to. They have to deal with that. Versus if you do share buybacks return profits to the shareholders by making the stock price go up without creating a tax event. Again, very technical stuff, but let me try and summarize this for you. Okay. So how do we summarize this? What we've done is we've assessed to see how do we again divide when is someone looking at a stock as a commodity versus when is someone looking at a stock as a business. And here's what we've concluded. If you are a trader, trader, who is flipping stocks, so you buy some shares today and next week you sell them, and the next week you buy some, and then a day later you sell them, and then you buy some, and then you see some trend and you sell them. You're treating stocks not as a business. You're looking at the stocks as a commodity. You're a short term, you can call it a short term investor, but reality is you're not really an investor, you're a trader. And if you're going to be trading, then you're going to end up treating your stocks as if they were that retail smartphone store, as if it was the house that you're flipping. So as a trader who's holding for the short term, you're going to pay 2.5% on the market value of the shares. You have $100,000 of Tesla shares that you're trading in and out of. You will end up spending $2,500 giving away into the Zakat bucket. Okay. Instead, if you're a long-term investor, and the way we defined this was just kind of looking at the terms in the market, holding on to shares for at least, let's say, 365 days. Your intention is you're a long-term investor, that you're planning to hold for a long period of time. Then what happens is now you're looking at the stock as a business, because the long-term price of the stock is going to be a function of its profitability and its anticipated future profits. So we take that into account and we say, now you're going to pay zakat based on the cash, the accounts receivable, and inventory. Okay. All of that is still very complicated. So how do you solve this problem? There's a tool that's available on the internet. You can go to the website, zakat.zoya.finance. Okay, it's a website, zakat.zoya.finance. Very simple. You go in here, you say, I have this many shares of this company, and this many shares of this company, and this many shares of this other company. And you can select in a drop-down box. Am I investing for the short term or am I investing for the long term? And it will do the math for you. If you're investing for the short term, it will automatically take 2.5% of the market value. If you're investing for the long term, it will automatically pull the balance sheet for the company, calculate how much zakat you have to pay based on cash, accounts receivable, inventory, and just give you a little number at the bottom and say, this is how much zakat you have to pay. The whole process becomes very simple, easy to follow. You don't have to worry about balance sheets. You don't have to build an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to get into all this technical detail that I described. At the end of the day, you go to the tool, you just have to put in how many shares you have, and is it for the short term or the long term, and you will get your answer, inshallah. Okay. I'll skip through most of the rest of the content, but you do have ways to contact us after the webinar. If you want to take a screenshot or a photo of this, you can reach out to info@shariaportfolio.com if you're interested in communicating with Sharia Portfolio directly, or you can reach out to me directly as well at umer@shariaportfolio.com. And either way, somebody will respond to you if you have any questions, comments, feedback, anything like that. But I will end the sort of like the lecture part of it here and get straight into other Q&A that people have.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Umar, for that introduction. I think hopefully it gives people some idea of who is eligible to pay zakat, because I think a lot of people might just be curious about that, and also what is zakat payable on. So I think those are two important topics to address, and hopefully that provides some idea. I answered one of the questions regarding the $8,000 requirement for the gold value. And so that 85 grams of gold, Sheikh, that's based on whatever the value is at the prevailing time that you're calculating it, correct? So the question
That is correct.
is it based, does that factor in the inflation internalizing the price of gold today? That was one of the questions. So I think that is yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what we do is there's to get into the technical detail of it, the scholars have said that 20 dinars worth of gold, which is what the zakat is due on if you have at least 20 dinars worth of gold. But obviously, most of us, we deal with US dollars, British pounds, euro, etc. And so we convert that 20 dinars either into 85 grams, as some scholars have said, or 87.48 grams, as other scholars have said. It's a rounding error. It doesn't really matter which one you go with. And so you go to something like goldprice.org and you put that value in, and it will give you the output that it's approximately $8,000. And that's where we get that from. It's inflation adjusted and also adjusted, not just inflation, but also adjusted for the supply and demand associated with gold. So there's multiple factors that go into that. Should I just start taking questions from the Q&A?
I think we can dive in so that we keep getting that done. And we're also trying to get other attendees who are trying to join sorted out so they can hopefully join in as well.
Okay. So the question says, Assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum salam. Please cover zakat rules for rental properties. Good question. So let's just go through real estate more comprehensively. Okay, so number one, if you have a house that is your house that you live in, you do not have to pay zakat on that because it's something you're making use of. If you have two houses and maybe you live in two different cities, or you even live in the same city and one's further away, one's closer, again, you're using those houses. Therefore, you do not have to pay zakat on your own houses that you have for your own use. If you purchased a house for flipping purposes, just to repeat, because you buy houses, improve them, maybe you develop them, do some construction, do some renovation, and then you sell the house, you will end up paying 2.5% on the full market value of the house. If you buy a house for rental purposes, now your intention has completely changed. So now your rental property, the house that you bought, is a fixed asset that you're using for income generation. That's the technical business language, is now it is a fixed asset that you're using for income generation, and you no longer will pay zakat on that house. Okay? Because just like I said, in the pizza shop, if you have a pizza making machine that you're using to make pizzas, that is a fixed asset to generate income. You will not be paying zakat on that. So you will not be paying zakat on the rental property. However, what will happen is as you get rent in from the property, and that as that rent joins the rest of the balance in the bank account, and as the expenses go out and rent comes in and all of this is happening, at the end of the year or whenever your zakat due date comes, you will automatically be paying on some portion of that rent that stayed behind in your bank account. So there is zakat, but there's no zakat to be paid on the house itself. The zakat gets paid out of the net rent that you have collected based on just whatever's left in your bank account as a natural part of that. The question was, please clarify how to calculate zakat on retirement accounts. So if you have a 401k, a Roth 401k, an IRA, a Roth IRA, or something like that, 403b, there's many other programs, then what you do is you would use the website that I gave you earlier, zakat.zoya.finance. And what you can do there is go to that website and put in all of the contents of your retirement account. So you can say, I have this many SPUS, this much TSLA, this much VOO, whatever you have, and it will calculate the zakat for you. Zakat on the retirement accounts is going to be calculated as you would treat it as a long-term investment. So your zakat is actually going to be very little. So for example, if you held SPUS, okay, Sharia portfolio US as an example, the cash accounts receivable and inventory portion of that is approximately 12%, of the market value. And you pay 2.5% of that. So the total zakat you end up paying is something like 0.03%. Okay, it's a very, very small amount of zakat that you end up paying. The tool will do that math for you. Make use of that, inshallah. Okay. Okay. Also, I've heard if we have short-term debts, we can subtract them from our assets. Please clarify. That is correct. I skipped over the slide just for the sake of time. But if you have any bills that are due, whether it might be your credit card bill, your electricity bill, your water bill, some amount that you owe somebody, a house mortgage that is due in the next few days, next few weeks, basically, then you would subtract all of that from your bank balance. You would say, I do not have to pay zakat on this because it is something that has become due and you need to pay it. You will not subtract out a loan that you have, for example, a 30-year mortgage that you have on your house. You will not subtract that out. But if you have bills that are due, they are payable, they have become due, and now you just need to write the check, or your bank just needs to go through the auto pay process or whatever it might be, then you can go ahead and subtract that from the total amount of money that you have in your bank before you do the 2.5% and you pay the zakat. Question is, when does zakat need to be paid by? So number one, important to remember that zakat is not something that is necessarily aligned with the month of Ramadan, nor is it aligned with the month of Muharram, nor is it aligned with any specific time. The very first time zakat becomes due is when you've had $8,000 and you've had that for 354 days. On that exact day, whatever that date might be, Muharram, Rajab, Sha'ban, Ramadan, whatever, on that specific date is the first time you will pay zakat. And then what you do is 354 days after that, your zakat becomes due again on whatever balance you have on that date, and then 354 days after that, 354 days after that. So if it happens to be on the 1st of Ramadan, then it will always be due on the 1st of Ramadan every single year. What about ETFs or mutual funds made up of multiple stocks? How to calculate zakat for this? The answer is the same. The ETFs and the mutual funds are just baskets of stocks. You treat them like stocks. If you're holding them for the long term or if they're part of your retirement account, then you could just go to the Zakat tool that I pointed to earlier and put in your whatever ETFs and mutual funds that you may have. It will do the math for you and tell you what Zakat you have due. Zakat on HSA, yes. 401k, yes. And the calculation is exactly what I just spelled out. I believe last year the Fiqh Council was going to formalize the fatwa for Zakat and stocks. Can you provide an update for that, please? Good question. We were going to formalize, I'm part of the Fiqh Council. We were going to formalize the fatwa on Zakat for stocks. It's actually been written up. We have a draft ready, but we have not yet voted on it to finalize it. I hope that will happen very soon, inshallah. We do plan to finalize that soon. Do we pay Zakat on investment properties that were purchased with the intention of renting? However, it has been sitting empty. If the idea was that you've purchased it as a rental property, and that was your intention, that it's a rental property, if it's sitting empty, you're not paying Zakat on it. So I'm a long-term investor. What will my Zakat on 100,000 amount of multiple companies? I don't know which stocks you have. You will have to go plug that into the zakat.zoya.finance website, put in exactly which companies you have, and it will calculate the Zakat for you. It will end up being most likely less than $1,000, but go do the math exactly, and then you can pay Zakat on that. Okay. Zakat on lot that you buy for building house in the future. If you purchase the lot because you are planning to build a house for yourself, then you will not be paying Zakat on it. If you purchase the lot because you plan to build a house and then sell that, then you will pay Zakat on the market value because your primary intention is investment and not for yourself. How do I know if I'm investing in short-term or long-term? Look at your intention. Are you looking to hold the stock for 365 days or more? Or are you looking to buy and sell more frequently? If you're doing it more frequently, then it's short term. If you're looking to hold for, approximately a year or more, that is going to be long term. How do you pay Zakat on RRSP and RESP? For those that aren't aware, RRSP and RESP are retirement plans offered in Canada, and it would work very similar to a 401k type of plan. Go into the tool and select long term and put in your holdings, and it will do the math for you and tell you how much Zakat you have to pay. Okay, the question is, okay, we answered that one. Let me do the shorter ones first. How do you know if a good, honest source that will appraise jewelry to determine the Zakat on? I mean, generally it's jewelers. I think jewelers and whatever value they appraise, it's fine, inshallah. If it's off by the reality of jewelry is that, and even gold itself, when you try and sell gold, you're actually not going to receive the same value that you find on goldprice.org. Same thing with jewelry is when you try to sell it, you actually end up selling it for a little bit less than what the real value might be. That's okay. I mean, just whatever appraisal value the jeweler has put on it, that would be deemed sufficient. And if you don't know, then you can estimate. So you can estimate how much gold does it have, how much diamond does it have, how much did you buy it for, how much do you think that went up in value? Don't worry too much about getting it exactly right. Has the URL changed? I googled Zakat, so I was directed to one of them redirects to the other. So both of those URLs are the same. Either one will work fine. There's multiple URLs multiple paths to the same destination. What is the methodology used by the Zoya Zakat tool? Who are the scholars who have approved this? The methodology used by the Zoya Zakat tool is exactly what I explained just a few minutes ago, which is that if you say I'm investing for the short term, then it will calculate your Zakat as being 2.5% of the market value of the shares. And if you say I'm investing it for the long term, then it will calculate 2.5% of the book value of the cash, the accounts receivable, and the inventory of the business. This is a methodology approved by majority of the scholars who are active in Islamic finance: Mufti Faraz Adam, Sheikh Joe Bradford, myself, a bunch of other names, and the two people that are behind Zoya, the two Sharia advisors. One of them is me, and one of them is Sheikh Joe Bradford, and both of us have reviewed the tool, tested the tool, and approved the tool. Alhamdulillah. Instead of Zoya to calculate Zakat on stocks for ETF, can calculate it manually for passive stocks using a generic percentage of the market value. If you have the ability to get the exact value, then I do not think you should be using a generic percentage. The reason the generic percentage can be problematic is if you're using generic, if it's a heavy industrial company, is going to be very asset heavy. And so the book value of the company is going to be very high. If you go with a generic value, you will not be paying enough zakat. And so is there a reason you would not want to use the tool? You can just go in there, put in a number. You don't have to log in. You don't have to give your email address. There's no issue. Just go in, put in, I have this many shares of this many ETF. It will do the math for you. If you do it manually, I'm just concerned that the manual calculation, particularly if you're doing it manually, that's not a problem. The problem is when you use a generic percentage, it's always an average, and averages don't always hold true. Averages can be used when you do not have specific information. So if you don't have specific information, go ahead and use the average. But when you have the specific information, you should try and give your zakat to the value that it is. Do I pay zakat on the least amount I carried in my checking from the previous year until now? No, you pay on the amount that is in your checking now. So when your zakat due date comes, and this is something that the scholars have now agreed upon, is whatever the amount is in your account, you just pay on that. You don't worry about where it went down to, did it go down, did it go up? It's very hard to track that way. I just put in Tesla, and it is showing very small amount, but the WBA is high, not clear. I don't know what WBA means.
Walgreens. Walgreens is high.
The what is high?
WBA, I think that's a symbol for Walgreens, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah.
He's
So
comparing the zakat for
okay.
Tesla
Yeah.
versus Walgreens, I think.
Yeah. So okay. So here's how it works, right? So zakat is if you're investing for the long run, the zakat is actually not on the market value at all. It has nothing to do with the market value. Because you're thinking of the business as a business, and when you look at the business, a company like Tesla, the market value of Tesla has very little to do with today's revenue and profitability, and a lot to do with what people expect it to be based on, Optimus and Power Packs and, Cybercab and full self-driving. And so people are thinking about where's the revenue headed? Where's the growth headed? And so if you look at, for example, the PEG, the profit to earning growth ratio, you're going to find it's a little bit higher for Tesla, right? You're also going to find the PE is a little bit higher for Tesla. So the market value is very high and the book value in comparison is very, very low. And because of that, the zakat is going to be a much smaller percentage of the total value of the business. Where if you look at another business, maybe the market value is not as disconnected from the book value, and therefore the zakat burden would not have as much of a gap. And so this will vary from stock to stock, and that is why I suggested do not go with generic values. Go put it in, and there's a tool that goes and studies the balance sheets for you. That's great. Make use of it. Okay, how do I calculate zakat on HSA? I do both short and long-term purchase and sell without necessarily waiting for a year. So for the long-term things that you're buying, put it in long-term, and for the short-term things, put it in a short-term. For every investment, you need to know, am I doing the short-term or long-term? If you're generically thinking short-term, then you can write it all as short-term, or if you're generically thinking long-term, then put it all as long-term. But you know which shares you're buying for short-term, which ones you're buying for long-term, base it on that. Which expenses can be deducted before I pay my zakat? I've heard monthly mortgage payment, utilities, cell phone, car insurance, groceries, kids, and activities. Any bills that you have that are due. So yes, your monthly mortgage payment, you probably have a bill that's due. Utilities, yes. Cell phone, yes. Car insurance, yes. Groceries, no, because you haven't purchased them yet. There's nothing due. And your kids' activities, there's nothing yet. It's not due. So some people get a little bit carried away with this and say, hey, anything that's coming up in the next month. Okay, I would say if you want to deduct any expenses that you think will come up in the next month, then also please add any income that you think is coming up in the next month, because that would make it fair, right? Like we don't want to cheat Allah over here. So if you want to do that, you can do that. But the better way is just things that have become due because they're now payable. They become a debt. When you get the electricity bill, right? And the bill says you must pay it in the next 2 weeks. That's now a debt that you owe. And even if you went into bankruptcy, that would be a bill that you would have to pay before you go and deal with other things, right? So that's the way to think about it. If you missed giving zakat due in the past, what should you do to amend that? Number one, make sure we are doing istighfar and tawbah, and we're making dua to Allah to forgive any mistakes that we might have made. And inshallah, Allah is all forgiving and all merciful, and He will forgive our mistakes. But at the same time, if we miss the zakat, we know that when we seek forgiveness, we also try to rectify our mistakes. So if I stole $10 from somebody, and now I want to seek forgiveness, I go seek forgiveness from Allah. I go seek forgiveness from the person, but I don't just say, hey, forgive me, I'll keep the $10. I also have to give the $10 back. And so if I owe zakat from the past, what I would do is, let's say I owed zakat on a particular asset. I would look at what was the value of that asset when I owed it. 5 years ago when I missed my zakat, that particular piece of gold that I had was worth, this much, and therefore I will pay this amount of zakat on it. So you will look at what the value was then, and you will pay the zakat on that. You don't have to look at what the value is now, and that's the way to take care of it. Do women have to pay zakat on gold if they're using it as a personal use? So I indicated there's a difference of opinion on this. The Hanafis say that they do have to. The Shafi'is and the Malikis say you don't have to. On this particular issue, my opinion is that you don't have to. If you're using the jewelry for the gold as a part of your jewelry that you wear, even if you wear it once in a while, or that's your intention, then you don't have to pay zakat on that. Are there sources or places to donate jewelry as zakat? I have no idea, honestly. I personally have no idea if there's any places that take jewelry as zakat. Generally, from what I'm aware, you have to sell the jewelry and then give the cash as zakat. But I don't know the answer to that question. If someone else that, maybe they can share that with us in email, and we can share that with our audience in the future, inshallah. Okay, if I pay zakat to online charity, do I need to cover the transaction fee? Credit card. Excellent question. This is an issue that has been discussed in the classical books, and you will find this in books from all the way from Imam an-Nawawi and even prior to that. And the question was asked is, if I have to send my zakat from where I live to another location, and I have to pay for the delivery of that zakat, because it used to be, dinars and dirhams and sheep and assets and all of these things. There was no credit card, there was no Venmo and Zelle. So if I have to deliver my zakat from one location to another location, who pays for that? And the scholars looked into this issue, and they agreed that the answer is that the zakat giver has to deal with the cost of the transportation or the delivery of the zakat. Based on that, we can analogize and say, if there's a credit card transaction fee, maybe 2.5%, 3%, then the giver of the zakat should be covering for that. Or maybe they can find a mechanism to pay the zakat without using a credit card, so they don't have to pay the 2.5%, 3%. They can write a check or do some or other form of transfer that doesn't cost the merchant any money. Okay. Is the reasoning on how to calculate zakat on stocks for business the same as Sulaiman alayhi salam reasoning with the sheep? Just wondering. So all of the zakat rulings that we have are grounded in what the Prophet ﷺ taught us as how to pay zakat. So for example, I have seen some places on the internet that people say we should pay zakat on stocks as if you're harvesting crops, okay? And we can't do that because the Prophet ﷺ already taught us how to pay zakat on business. So we can't say the Prophet ﷺ taught us how to pay zakat on business, and we're going to treat it like agriculture. It's not agriculture. He taught us how to pay zakat in agriculture, but he also taught us how to pay zakat in business. Since he taught us how to pay zakat in business, we just follow what he taught us. And what he taught us was, as a business, you have cash, then you have the money that people owe you, which is accounts receivable, which is like cash because you're going to get that money. And then you have the things that you're going to sell for cash, the inventory. So those are the three things we pay zakat on as a business. And that's really it. And we get that from the sunnah and the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Will the Zoya app max out to a specific percentage of the ETF value if it is unable to get details of the underlying components of the ETF? If it is, for some reason, the data is not available about a particular ETF, it will then use a generic average. And what we found was the generic average for the S&P 500. If you look at something like SPY or VOO, which represent the S&P 500, the average cash, accounts receivable, and inventory were approximately 30% of the market value of the shares. And so when an ETF components cannot be broken down, usually they can be, then Zoya will resort for the components where it is not able to figure that out. It will resort to using the generic average, which is 30%, not based on some Sharia ruling, just based on our empirical analysis of the S&P 500. If you look at the FTSE, which is the stock market in the UK, it's a different average. It's not 30%. Okay, if we are in debt, do we still pay zakat? It depends on what type of debt you are talking about. If you are talking about debt because you've purchased a house on a mortgage, yes, you will still pay zakat because that debt has not become due. If you are in debt, if the debt becomes due, okay, if the debt becomes due, like I need to pay this amount like in the next week or the next 2 weeks or something like that, then and you just subtract that debt from your total assets, and you will see if you're eligible, if you still have $8,000 or you don't have $8,000. But if the debt is not due, it's long-term debt, then you do not subtract that from your total assets. Okay. How to calculate zakat on 401k, which I'm holding for 25 years and zakat was not paid before. Now I'm withdrawing some money every few months as needed in retirement years. Okay, alhamdulillah. 25 years is a very long time, and you didn't pay zakat on it. Again, we seek we make tawbah, we seek istighfar from Allah, and we ask Him for forgiveness. If you're able to compensate for the zakat that you didn't pay, then please try to do so. If you're not able to, then inshallah, Allah is all forgiving, and we hope that Allah will forgive that. Now that you have access to the 401k, please be paying zakat on the value of the 401k using the tool that I mentioned earlier, and continue to pay that for the future as well. Okay. I am planning to support some.
Just pause for a second. So some people have actually were guided to not pay on 401k, because I know there's a minority opinion that zakat is not due on 401k or 403b type assets because it's not fully accessible.
Yeah.
So if they, that's where they might have heard that, yeah, just wait until it's accessible. So how do you want to comment on that, maybe? Because that comes up every now and then.
Yeah. So the two large bodies of fiqh scholars in North America are Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America, AMJA, and the second one is the Fiqh Council of North America, FCNA. Both of those bodies have ruled that you do pay zakat on the 401k, 403b, etc. And so the vast majority of scholars, I think 95% of the scholars in North America, agree that zakat is due on such retirement accounts. However, it's a matter of ijtihad. It's a matter of scholarly assessment and research and conclusion. And may Allah reward all of the scholars who've done this type of research to come to their conclusions. Some of the scholars have proposed, and they completely believe that there is no zakat due in the 401k. It's a minority opinion, but it's an opinion out there. If you follow that opinion, then yes, you would not have to pay zakat on it. But if you're going to follow that opinion, please, whatever opinion you follow, make sure you follow after looking into the details a little bit. Don't just say, I want to take the easy opinion and I'm done. But, look at it intellectually, understand why they feel you should pay zakat on the 401k or why they feel you shouldn't pay zakat on the 401k. And then once you come to the conclusion, you can follow that opinion, because when it comes to fatwa is not binding, as in you don't have to follow this scholar versus that scholar. You choose whichever one you think is the one that convinces you. Okay, whichever one convinces you, because I believe in the scholar. They've studied a lot, they've researched a lot. Their conclusion sounds good to me. It's logical. That's what I want to follow. And then, inshallah, as long as you've done some level of assessment of that, then Allah will be happy with whatever answer and conclusion you've come up with. Who receives the zakat and how do they receive it? The recipients of zakat, and that's one of the slides that I skipped in my lecture, are mentioned in Surah At-Tawbah, where there's a specific verse where Allah says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ, that indeed zakat is for لِلْفُقَرَاءِ, those that are the poor, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, and the needy, وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, those that are employed by the government to collect zakat, وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم, and those whose hearts are leaning towards Islam. There's a whole difference of opinion on what that means. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, which is slaves who want to purchase their freedom, which we don't have slavery anymore. وَالْغَارِمِينَ, those people who have wealth, but they have so much debt. They have, debt that has become due and payable. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and those people who are fighting in the way of Allah in jihad. Imam Malik said this is referring to people who are going in jihad. وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ, and those people who might have money, but they're traveling and they don't have the money liquid with them. They don't have it handy with them. So maybe they're in another land, and they don't have Venmo and Zelle and all of these things, and they've run out of money, and so you're helping them out. So zakat is due specifically for 8 categories of people, and generally speaking, it's for the poor and the needy. And these poor and needy are defined as people who do not have nisab. They do not have enough money that they can give zakat, and so you can help them out by giving them zakat, and that is the 8 categories of zakat recipients. How do they receive it? You give it to them, or you give it to an agent who gives it to them. So maybe you find an organization, you vet the organization, you make sure. A lot of zakat organizations, relief organizations, unfortunately, much of their money goes into administrative expenses or it goes into, a lot of overhead. And so please do your research on which organizations you're using. Ask your local imam, sheikh, scholar, ask them, vet the organizations and give to organizations where the majority of the money is actually going towards zakat itself. Are we able to give zakat to build Islamic school or masjid in the USA? The default fatwa on that is that you do not give zakat to an Islamic school or a masjid, because zakat is only given to those 8 categories, and a Islamic school or masjid would not be one of those 8 categories. I am on a 24-month payment plan to pay for a property abroad. Can those payments be deducted? The payment that's becoming due immediately, the one payment that is due right now, you can deduct that one. The other 23 months of payments, no, you cannot deduct those. Okay, I'm planning to support some family members who I found out they are struggling to put food on the table, but they have some gold. I'm not sure how much gold they have and not sure how to find out. Okay, if they happen to have, you can ask them. You can ask them if they have a certain amount of gold. And if they happen to have $8,000 worth of gold, then yeah, they should sell some of it. If they're struggling to put food on the table, they shouldn't really be holding on to gold. They should put food on the table. And if they don't have enough gold, it's just a small amount, then you should go ahead and give them zakat. Can we pay zakat to own siblings who are zakat eligible? Good question. Zakat, the best preference for giving zakat is for those who are close to you. They can be close to you as in their family, or they can be close to you as in they live in your neighborhood, your society. Your neighbors have more of a right of zakat on you than others do. Your siblings have more of a right to zakat than others do. Your cousins have more of a right to zakat than others do. However, note that you cannot pay zakat to your parents, or basically anyone above you, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, because it is your responsibility to take care of your parents outside of zakat. It's your responsibility anyway. You also can't give zakat to your kids or grandkids or great-grandkids, any of that, because you are responsible for taking care of them. And you cannot give zakat to your wife, because you, as a husband, are responsible for taking care of your wife. And for the Hanafis, the wife is not able to give zakat to the husband, because they say the wife's going to give him the money and he's just going to spend it on her. So yes, you can give to siblings, but you cannot give to parents and children, and you cannot give to your wife. And according to the Hanafis, the wife cannot give to the husband. Do I need to pay zakat on land I invested in, but it's not allotted to me yet? Yes, because it will be allotted to you, right? And so if it's for investment purposes, yes, you will be paying zakat on that. I know you said the Zoya tool automatically uses companies' assets from the balance sheet, but the website has information section that says scholars have approved the use of taking 30% of the market value. Just to confirm, is the smart calculation method automatically activated? No. The default, you can go and test this yourself. Go type in, for example, go test right now. Type SPUS, okay? One of the ETFs provided by Sharia Portfolio Funds Business, SP Funds. And when you type that in, you will see it doesn't use 30%. 30% is only used when specific information cannot be determined. If you don't believe me, test it. Please test it. Put in SPUS. You will see it's not equal to 30%. It's equal to something like 11 or 12%. Okay, that's what you're going to find. So it varies from fund to fund. The 30% only really makes sense when you're not able to do the specific calculation. My nephew is studying and getting a student loan. His father has assets he would not sell. Can I pay zakat to my nephew's education? If your nephew is if your nephew himself has reached the age of bulugh, like they've reached puberty, and they're their own person, and they're taking a loan, and they do not have an nislab, and that's why they're taking loan. They're their own person. You can treat them differently than their father, and you can help them with that loan, inshallah. Okay, I think we just answered all of the questions. Oh, there's a new one. Is the 30% a conservative number to calculate zakat on equities, stocks, and ETFs? I do not believe it is a conservative number. I believe it was a average, not very conservative. So the S&P 500 was yielding approximately 30% when we came up with that math a year or two ago. And so if you want to be conservative, maybe you can make it 35% or something like that. Okay. Ali Rida, any other questions? Because we
So far,
have
I'm not
3 minutes
seeing
left.
it. I think we've zoomed quite quickly. I think one of the questions that that comes about is pertaining to what about things like restricted stock units and things like that? Do you want to comment on something like that?
Sure. Yeah, so important question when it comes to employee stock purchase plans, restricted stock units, stock options. There's a lot of different types of stocks that you might get from your employer. Stock options, you do not have to pay zakat on because stock options are not deemed to have value until you exercise them and convert them into stock. Employee stock purchase plans and restricted stock units and just any stocks that you might receive from your employer, if they are unvested, you will not pay zakat on that, okay, because you have not vested through them. If they become vested and you work for a public company or a company that is private but has liquidity events, then you would pay zakat on it, just like you would pay on stocks otherwise. So it doesn't matter that it's ESPP, ESOP, RSU, doesn't really matter. You would treat it like any other stocks. And so you would think, am I going to hold this for the short term or the long term? And you would treat it accordingly. If it's a private company with no liquidity, then you probably want to hold and not pay zakat until you actually experience a liquidity event, because otherwise the values as measured by the 429A can be all over the place. And for those that are in private companies, you know what I'm talking about. The values can be bouncing all over the place, and so it's probably best to hold and pay zakat later. Unrelated to zakat, are there halal 529 options? 529s are tricky because the selection of equities available in them is usually limited. If you can buy the most halal option, that could be okay, like maybe something like the S&P 500. But if that's not even available, I just wouldn't recommend 529. Do you pay zakat on 529 on UTMA? Yes, you would pay zakat on 529 UTMA, and you would be paying those as zakat for your children. So not zakat for yourself, but zakat for your children. There's a difference of opinion. Do you pay zakat for children? The Hanafis say no. The other three madhabs say you do pay zakat for children. And my view is that you should pay zakat for the children. Is there zakat on Bitcoin if I held it for more than 1 year? It doesn't matter if you held the Bitcoin for 1 year or 1 month or 1 day or whatever. Zakat on Bitcoin is going to be 2.5%. Bitcoin is currency, so just like you pay zakat on a dollar, you pay zakat on a Bitcoin. And so whatever amount you have, you take the market value multiplied by 2.5%, and that would be the zakat that you pay on your Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, whatever. Even your meme coins. Do not invest in meme coins, but if you have meme coins, you would be paying 2.5% of the market value. Okay. One more question. I think we'll end with this one. Do I pay zakat on the least amount I carried in my checking account until now? No, you pay on what you have in your bank account when your zakat becomes due. Doesn't matter that you haven't held it for a year. It doesn't matter. The 1 year only applied to the very first time that you paid zakat, that you needed to end that year with $8,000. After that, it doesn't matter. As long as you're above $8,000, you will pay on whatever the balance is. Okay. And the scholars have now all come to agreement on that. Can taxes on gains, assuming it sold today, be deducted only if the taxes have become due? Do you treat crypto like Bitcoin, same as Bitcoin as currency, and pay on the market value? Yes, Bitcoin is currency, and so you would pay on the market value. How much zakat do I pay on agriculture land I'm inheriting from my parents? Send me an email on that one. That gets complicated. Agriculture is very complicated. So we'll end here, inshallah, okay?
Thank you. One comment I'll make on the UTMA versus 529. There is some plans to work and hopefully make, if possible, an option that is a Sharia compliant option for the 529. I don't know how long that's going to take, but we're looking into that, inshallah. So whenever that good news is available, our team or anyone else who's working on that initiative can share. In terms of the alternative, just to briefly comment, I know it's not a zakat related topic, but hopefully if anyone else has a couple more last minute questions, they can feel free to chime in. But I think this is helpful to note because UTMA options are good alternatives to the 529s because they let you invest in a way that can allow you to select your own investments and you're not restricted by the state sponsoring the plan. And so, I would recommend anyone considering that, speak with an advisor. That might be a potential option worth considering. I do that for my kids, and it's a great tool, not just for education savings, but as a good focus for long-term, transitioning of wealth to your kids as well. So just wanted to throw that out there. All right. So yeah, I think this would be the first time that we end within the hour because we knocked out all the questions.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah.
And the good news is you have our contact information. If any of you wish to reach out to us directly, you can always contact info@Sharia Portfolio or reach out directly to our Sharia advisor here. As you can see, he's very sharp and knowledgeable. So we're really blessed to have him among us. And I hope you're all able to have taken away some nuggets from today's session. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please do let us know. Yes, the meeting is recorded, so if you missed any parts of it or want to catch the explanations, I know sometimes we went a bit fast. It will be available on YouTube as well. And if you did sign up through Zoom, our recording I think will be sent out during one of the newsletters as well. So I know there's a tax question that just came in, so I'll answer this and then we'll wrap up. The UTMA versus 529. There is taxes owed on the gains in the UTMA. However, 529s are not taxed. So that might be one of the considerations as to why people might consider, the 529. But what you do need to keep in mind is that it's the first $1,350 of gains are generally not taxed. The second $1,350 is taxed at the child's federal income tax rate. And normally, because kids and children do not have much income, it often falls into the 10% bracket. So in some cases, even 0% for any qualified dividends. But above 2,700 is when it would apply at the parent's marginal tax bracket or rate. So there is some difference versus if you were investing in your own brokerage account as an individual parent or joint account with your spouse, for example. You would be paying gains on all the amount of gains that you earn in the year. But within the UTMA, there is some break. And from what we've seen historically, because of the flexibility with regards to how you can invest the funds, generally speaking, you can potentially make a bigger return than the 529s because of the lack of limited, you have more flexibility and you can be more selective with your investments. So hopefully, that people are generally concerned about the tax benefit that 529 carries. It can be far outweighed by the potential other benefits that UTMAs bring to the table. So hopefully that helps. Again, thank you once again, everyone. I really appreciate your time. I pray everyone has a successful Ramadan. Please keep us in your du'as and our sheikh as well. And we look forward to having you on in our next program. Once again, thank you.